tautri te manga, ko Waikato te awa, ko Ngāti Rākawa te iwi, ko Ngāti Hiri te Hapū, ko Pikitu te marae, ko Kirikiri Roa ahau. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Tēnā koutou, ko Auraki te maunga, ko Waimakarere te awa, ko Kaitahu te iwi, ko Takutai Ojititi marae, no Ototahi ahau, ko Lucy Kaiser taku ingoa, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
So, good morning everyone, and thanks for coming along today to the slightly earlier session. So Lucy and I are here today to talk about some research that we've been undertaking, funded through the Resilience to Nature's Challenge, National Science Challenge, on the role of iwi management plans in natural hazard management. And we happen to have the two directors here today, which is great, Shane and Richard. So thank you for coming along. So this project has been going for about 3 or 4 years, and we're just going to take you through the different stages of the project and some of our findings. So iwi and hapū management plans are really important documents. They're legislated under the Resource Management Act. It's not mandatory for an iwi or hapū to have an iwi management plan, but if they do have one and it's lodged with the council, they become legislative documents. So how many of you here have actually heard of iwi or hapū management plans? Oh, awesome. And how many of you have actually used them? Excellent. So they're amazing documents, particularly the sort of second and third generation documents of these plans. They provide a really nice cultural context for an area that you might be working in. They outline the priorities that iwi or hapū have. Many of them have quite a process outlined on how they want to be engaged with. So if you want to engage with an iwi or hapū, some of them go into quite a bit of detail as to what process you should follow. Some even go as far as what the costs are associated with that anticipated and expected engagement. There is no sort of structure that they have to follow or content that they have to have. It's completely up to the iwi or hapū to decide what information is included in these plans. So they're all a little bit different. They provide a really good opportunity to include information on natural hazards, management options, some of the actions that they might want to pursue for reducing risks, as I mentioned, the engagement processes, and mitigation options. But there's a real variety out there of what they actually do include. So legislatively, they're really highly valued and really important documents that are often not perhaps given the value that they should have. So our research has looked at some of these, the content of them and some of the issues, the challenges and the opportunities associated with them. So we structured our research into sort of 4 key stages. To start with, I started with a hiss and a roar and then realised actually this is quite a big project, so I had to break it down into some doable stages. So the first stage was really looking at the context of these plans. What's the legislative provisions for them? When should they be used? Who uses them? Looking at the governance arrangements, looking at engagement and how that's been included in the plans, and mataranga Māori. How is that knowledge, what are the opportunities for that knowledge to be included in the plans? Stage 2, we then looked at a case study, and we looked at the Bay of Plenty region, which we'll go into, and did some specific analysis of the iwi management plans in the Bay of Plenty region. Stage 3 really looked at the interface around how do councils use iwi and Hapū Management Plans? When do they use them? And also perhaps us as researchers or consultants or at central government level, how are we using iwi management plans to help design our research or our projects? How can iwi management plans inform the design of what we are looking at? All the consultancy projects that we do. And then stage 4 has sort of been a summary of the whole findings of the project, bringing all those different parts together.
So we decided it was important to put together an actual design of how we envision the structure of the project, with clear linkages between the goals of what we wanted to achieve, the inputs, the activities, and then the outcomes at the end of the project, all of which have been underpinned by kaupapa Māori principles, which was really important to us. So some of the principles that underpin our project, we actually borrowed from our team Vision Matawanga strategy at GNS. So principles of tika, so principles of being just and fair, pono, so genuine and sincere, and then aroha, so caring and compassion. We also made sure to employ, for the stage 3 of our project, when we were verifying some of our findings with iwi, we had a cultural advisor from GNS accompany us on all of our hui to make sure that we were following the correct tikanga, and to sort of make sure everyone was culturally safe in that environment. So we developed a little waka to sort of represent our project, with the kaupapa driving the waka, the outcomes steering us, and then the inputs, activities and goals, I suppose pushing us forward to achieve our outcomes.
So for our stage 1 part of the project, is really around the setting the scene. And so iwi management plans fall under the Resource Management Act. And this is kind of the area of influence that they have, that we found. They can have a direct influence on the regional policy statements and on the district plans, as well as all the non-statutory planning tools as well. They also need to be taking into account iwi management plans. And the iwi and Hapū that the plans, some of the plans that we looked at, completely understand this and take this further. So this is from the Tauranga Moana iwi management plan, where they recognise here, the importance of the regional, district and city plans, looking at state of the environment, compliance monitoring, resource consent processes and policy development. So they have expectations of how their plan should be used to inform planning, as well as the regional policy statements, the Tauranga Harbour program, and their own framework. So they're very much in line with the expectations and the opportunities for these plans to influence planning. And even though they are legislated or mandated under the Resource Management Act, we've also found that there are other acts and other influences that these plans can have, which we'll go into a bit later. So the stage 2 was really looking at a case study. So we chose the Bay of Plenty as a case study area because they have every single natural hazard that we have in New Zealand is in the Bay of Plenty. They've got it all covered with volcanoes, tsunamis, flooding, landslide, sea level rise, like whatever we have, geothermal, it's all right there in the bay. They also have a lot of iwi and Hapū management plans. So it was really interesting to see, because they have every single hazard that we have, that you can get pretty much, and they have a lot of plans, how are natural hazards actually included or acknowledged within these plans? We were also interested in, because of all that as well, how are the councils actually recognising and taking into account the content of the iwi management plans? So we ended up assessing 21 Hapū and iwi management plans, so these were the ones that we could access. And we did a content analysis of each of those to see how many of those plans actually included natural hazards. And when I'm talking about natural hazards, I'm also including climate change, because we can't really remove climate change from natural hazards. So we did a content analysis, and then from then looked more in depth at those plans that did include natural hazards. So the key findings that we had was that 81% of the iwi and hapū actually had a boundary that included coastlines. So quite a number of them did include an area that had a coastline, and yet only 10% addressed sea level rise or tsunami. So there was kind of a lack of acknowledgement there, and there's different reasons for that, or that raised different questions. Is it because we as scientists and researchers aren't sharing our knowledge appropriately with the iwi or hapū to allow them to include that information in their plans? Or is it priorities? In the Bay of Plenty, water quality is a real issue, and so for some iwi and hapū, they would rather focus on water quality and getting that sort of more advanced than some of these other areas. So there's a whole lot of reasons around that. But you'll see that generally hazards were quite underrepresented in these plans. Sort of climate change was mentioned, but without detail. It was just sort of climate change, but no specific, in a lot of cases, recognition of what exactly about climate change is the issue. Is it sea level rise? Is it increased rainfall, more intense rainfall? Erosion, and then flooding next, but not a lot of recognition of hazards. When we're looking at the other statutory documents that are acknowledged in iwi and hapū management plans, 81% of them did include reference to the local district plan, followed by other planning documents, and then sort of regional plans and regional policy statements. But there was that recognition in the plans generally about the importance of other Resource Management Act plans. So then we did a further analysis of the plans. So six plans out of the 21, 6 included reference to natural hazards. So it's not a great representation. Of those, 4 did quite comprehensively. In fact, they did a great job. And so we further looked at those to see how they had actually included, and looking at the details of the information provided around natural hazards and climate change. Looked at the relationship to the other plans, looked a little bit more closely at the communication, the consultation, and the engagement expectations that they had. And then also looked at the recognition of iwi and hapū management plans and council plans, including civil defence emergency management plans, which was quite interesting. So the key findings of this stage 2 that we had, primarily these plans are written specifically for councils. A lot of the newer plans are written by planners to make sure that they fit sort of the structure of other district plans and regional policy statements to make them more usable by council staff. So they'll have objectives or issues, objectives, policies, and then actions that they have associated with it, so that council staff can actually pick them up, and it's a lot sort of less aspirational, I guess, in a way, and more specific, so that they can use them in their day-to-day activities. It also makes it easier for us as researchers, consultants, perhaps in central government, to be able to be clear around what are the issues, what are the policies, and what are the specific actions that we can be taking to help address some of the issues that are coming up in these plans. Some include natural hazards, but most don't. For instance, Tauranga Moana plan, which was a joint plan by 3 iwi, and it was put out in 2016, there's no mention of climate change or sea level rise in that plan, and yet it's on the Tauranga harbour. Again, that's because water quality was a real issue. So there's other things going on and resourcing challenges. So there's competing priorities that we need to understand when we're looking at these plans. So we have a report available on that, which is available on the GNS website, or you can contact either Lucy or I for that. There's some really good examples of what we sort of call cries for help. Very explicit information in these plans around what they need. So from Matakana, they've said in their plan, we urgently need an effective warning system for the islands. Now the emergency managers actually weren't aware of this being in the plan. And so just by highlighting this, they could say, oh, we can help them out with that. And it's just not about a warning system, but we need to be mapping tsunami inundation, doing an evacuation plan, looking at signage and education and a whole lot of other things that go along with that. But it really could raise this issue for the emergency managers as well, and make it a priority for their funding. In the Rākawa plan, there's some very clear calls here for the council to look at. They've said in their plan, we are not well informed about the challenges posed in the event of a natural disaster. We do not have a comprehensive response plans in place to be able to respond to natural disasters. They are unsure of the natural hazards planning by local authorities and government agencies. They are unclear as to the role that they play amongst the Waikato regional local government nexus in times of natural hazard disasters. This is all in the plan. And so as council or for others to pick this up and to be able to start addressing some of these issues will directly help the iwi and hapū, as well as being great impact for us as researchers or scientists or consultants. So they hold a lot of really important information and flags that we really need to be aware of.
So for stage 3, we were really interested in verifying the findings that we had so far in our stage 2 report. So firstly, we circulated the report with all the iwi, hapū and councils that were featured to get feedback and to invite them to participate in a series of hui. So in May, we ran a series of hui with iwi, hapū and councils with some follow-up hui in, I think it was October later in the year. To really answer some of the questions that we had coming out of that stage 2 report. So what was the relationship between iwi and hapū and regional and district councils in the development and implementation of IHMPs? What's the relationship between IHMPs and council policies and actions? How accessible is hazard-specific scientific knowledge for iwi and hapū? What is the potential for IHMPs to inform science direction, and how are science outputs aligned with IHMPs? So originally we had this structured as sort of one big report, but as we were going through some of our findings for stage 3, we found it was quite clearly divided into a council, iwi, hapū framework, and then questions around access to scientific knowledge and how scientists were using iwi management plans. So sort of had to make a division into 3A and 3B. So yeah, hui with iwi, meetings with council. We also met with a variety of consultants who had been involved in the writing of the IHMPs, because they provided quite an important sort of middle point between iwi and sort of the planning worlds. So they were able to offer some really interesting perspectives into the writing of them. And we sort of came with the same questions broadly for everyone, which was, do you use IMPs, whether that was iwi internally using them or councils using them? Do you consider them to be useful and used? And what are the challenges and opportunities for their use? So we had some preliminary findings. Firstly, we found that iwi management plans are highly valued plans within iwi and hapū, with 1 one interviewee referring to their IHMP as their Bible. And some really great comments as well from some of the consultants who were writing it, who said that the world is a better place for having iwi and hapū management plans. In terms of councils, there was quite a bit of mixed awareness of iwi and hapū management plans. Some were hyper aware of them and ran staff induction that involved information about iwi and hapū management plans, and some really hadn't engaged much with them at all, and they were just sort of documents that sat on the shelf. But we definitely got feedback across the board that there is a huge potential for iwi and hapū management plans to contribute to hazard management in general. So we've come up with a variety of recommendations at a national level, broadly as Ministry for the Environment and McDem, but it obviously goes a bit wider than that, for councils, and then for CRIs and researchers. But I would say that a lot of our recommendations would be more broadly useful for practitioners. So at the national level, our recommendations were to include a session on iwi and hapū management plans and making good decisions, the NZPI program for commissioners. The Ministry for the Environment or Quality Planning to provide guidance on how to apply IHMPs with some practical advice in there. To include IHMPs in National Civil Defence and Emergency Management Plan and associated strategic documents, so there's something concrete within that. They'd also be useful in university planning programs so that students have some awareness of them before they become practitioners. MFE, LGNZ, McDem and other agencies should actively encourage and support councils to become aware, implement and value IHMPs by including them in guidance and templates, with the caveat that we do need to be very cognizant of local context, especially for some smaller councils that actually have quite well developed relationships with local iwi and hapū, and they actually not use iwi management plans that much because they don't have much consents coming through. So yes, just making sure that we respect some of the local contexts in that advice. The councils, as the example I used before of a council that was doing quite a good job, that included it in new staff inductions. So at the very start of someone's time at a council, they're already aware of what they are, where to access that information, and who to ask if they have any questions. Councils to include relevant IHMPs on their webpage. So while quite a few were available online, we weren't able to access all of them. So it would be very useful if the most up-to-date versions were available. Sometimes there were draft plans available, not the finalised versions, which can be problematic if they're missing an entire section or there's been some key changes to wording. CDM staff consider IHMPs to help identify priorities, gaps and challenges. And while some civil defence, or some regions, the iwi may not have any iwi management plans in place, it can still be useful to have a look at IHMPs from another region to get an idea of some of the engagement processes and just to see what's out there. It can be quite good for context. You could align long-term planning with iwi priorities and challenges that are identified in iwi and hapū management plans. Ensuring natural hazard information is shared with iwi to help inform their plans, since the council was primarily where a lot of iwi and hapū got their hazard management information from. It's pretty key to support access to that. And increasing funding opportunities for iwi and hapū involvement in RMA processes, particularly territorial authorities. So our final two recommendations are specifically for researchers, but I think more broadly practitioners as well, and for CRIs. So as researchers, we need to be using IHMPs to inform our research direction and design. There's so much key information in there that provide context for a region, that if you're working in a region and you come in having read it, there's so much information that you could have that you would probably not otherwise be able to get as a first step for engagement. So using it as a first stage of engagement without replacing the entire engagement process, and understanding the cultural context before research is proposed and undertaken, as opposed to during. Don't assume iwi are not scientifically literate. We talked to a lot of people who were extremely scientifically literate. but you know, there's still, I guess it's just about respect for each other and understanding that people do have that knowledge. Research organisations should consider IHMPs when writing them policy and strategy, and research officers should have an awareness of IHMPs and recommend and encourage other researchers to read them, like we are doing today. And for CRIs, it's similar but on an organisational level, so increasing internal awareness and use of IHMPs, creating a database of IHMPs and key contact details to assist staff in starting engagement processes, inviting iwi and hapū to lodge IHMPs with organisations if they're not lodged or easily accessible online. And CRIs can use IHMPs to build understanding of iwi and hapū research, interests and priorities to help identify relevant iwi and hapū to work with for general research topics.
So the key messages from all this is that iwi and hapū management plans are really valuable tools for us to use. They can be a really important part of the bigger toolbox for natural hazard management, along with all the other tools that we have, you know, building controls, land use planning, insurance. IMPs really need to be included in the toolbox because of the value that they have for those within the iwi and hapū as well as externally. I'd really encourage you, if you're doing work in any specific area, go and see if there is an iwi management plan or a hapū management plan. There may not be, but if there is, I would strongly encourage you to have a look at it and read it, because the information that they hold in there can really inform what you end up doing. Particularly if you're going to go and engage with iwi, if you can say, hey, I've read your plan, really interested in this aspect of it, you know, that's a really good way to start the conversation. If there isn't any hazard information in a plan, perhaps you need to be asking why. Not that, oh, well, it hasn't been included, but why hasn't it been included? Did they just not know that there's information out there available? You know, we need to up the game as far as how we are sharing our information. Or is it around other priorities that they may have? Quite often, you know, they're very explicit about what needs do they have. And again, that's around being able to tailor what we are doing to fit in with those needs. So having a look at these plans is a really easy first step. It's a desktop exercise. It's nothing to be scared of. You can do it just sitting at your desk if they're available, and it's a really great first start to understand the cultural context as well. It's also interesting whether iwi or hapū, where they are in the treaty process as to what's in their plan or how up to date their plan is, because that comes down to resourcing and the other priorities they might be having as far as preparing for their plan. So please feel free to contact us. We have our third report coming out very shortly. It's just being reviewed by iwi at the moment, and we have a paper coming out on the science sort of aspect, how to use the plans to inform science or research, coming out in the New Zealand Science Review shortly as well. But feel free to contact us.
Ian Bloodworth, I work for NZTA. So are there any plans to create a national register?
That would be great. That would be great.
Wendy, can you repeat the question?
The plans, is there a national register of plans? Some of the councils are linking in quite nicely geospatially in their GIS systems. You know, if you're wanting to work in a particular area, you can click on the GIS and it will bring up the appropriate plan. And I think that's a really nice approach, but it seems to be very piecemeal. What we'd like to do as part of this project is to take it national and look at all iwi management plans. So that could be a good way of actually starting some sort of national register. But at the moment, they only have to be lodged with the council. So it's very much sort of on a region by region basis.
Liz Colster, Transport Agency. I'm assuming all of these plans are bilingual. Is that true? It must have been challenging in the content analysis to work through Māori versions.
Yeah, no, they are. The content is all in English. Some of the foreword and the preface, it's in both Te Reo and in English. So it's written for council staff. So it's most of the content is in English.
Angela Hogg from FMG. Just wondering what sort of commercial engagement occurs with these iwi Hapū management plans. Are the Māori trusts and I guess the commercial entities that are part of the iwi and Hapū, are they referencing these plans, or are they engaging with them at all?
We didn't really look at that, go into that level of detail. What we did find, sometimes there can be a tension between the commercial arm of an iwi and the environmental arm. Sometimes their objectives may not align, but yeah, we didn't go into detail on that.
Kia ora, Alison Rocky, Ministry for the Environment. Of the 4 exemplars that you think cover natural hazards really well, what was it about them that they did well, other than that they did address it?
So some of them had specific chapters on climate change, or a specific chapter on natural hazards, or both. So they actually had more detail around it. One of them was kind of around almost like the 4 R's of emergency management: readiness, response, recovery and reduction. So they just went into quite specific detail as to what the problems were that they had, the issues that they had around climate change and natural hazards, even down to some of them had specific actions associated with who should be responsible for following up, regarding that issue. So they were a lot more specific and showed a good understanding of the hazards and climate change impacts and implications. So we were trying to emphasise those so that perhaps other iwi can go to those ones, because they do look around and see what other the content of other plans when they're developing theirs as well. So we're trying to really highlight those.
Over there, Kia ora, tēnā korua. Apanui Williams, I'm with Land Information New Zealand. I don't work directly with natural hazards or anything like that, but I heard, because it was iwi involvement, I was interested to come along and have a listen. So my question is sort of based on my listening. And I just wondered whether there was an opportunity to provide iwi or Hapū with guidelines or a checklist around the development of their plans, so that you know that they at least considered some of those hazards, natural hazards, from this research. So you get a good feel for what people could include in their plans, and so if you created a checklist or something like that, it might help them set that up. I also wondered about where you said that no plans exist and that councils are going to other Hapū or iwi and looking at their plans, whether or not they could create a straw man based on the knowledge they have around the hazards in that area, share that with the local iwi, and maybe work together to add to that. So there might be opportunities there. And I just wondered whether you guys covered the recovery side of things within your research around, okay, so a hazard has happened. A lot of marae are being used for people to go there post-hazards, and looking after them after their whole sort of well-being, and whether or not there's actually where those marae and that are situated, whether there's actually hazards around that could be mitigated as a priority, so that it can be used for that sort of mitigation stuff. Just thoughts?
We can both comment on those. Yeah, I'll just quickly say, as far as having a template for them, it's very much iwi and Hapū taking ownership of what they want in these documents. So there's purposefully no given structure for what content can be in these, because it comes down to priorities as well. For instance, water quality came through as being very strong. What some of the ideas that have been discussed as part of this project when talking to iwi and Hapū was around, during the development, of these plans that an iwi representative hot desks at a council, so that they can run ideas past the council to say, hey, we're looking at putting this or structuring the plan in this way. Would this make it easier for you or not? And really sort of being in the council, embedded in the council to understand what would work well and what wouldn't, as far as the content and the framing of what's going to be in the plan. And then once the plan's lodged, still having that hot desk in the council for the iwi rep, so that the council staff can then go to the iwi representative and say, oh, I'm trying to implement this part of your plan. Am I interpreting this right? Is this the intent that you had for this part of the plan, so that it goes both ways? So we thought that was actually quite a good idea, to sort of build trust and to get them valued sort of both ways. I'll let Lucy.
Yeah, I'll address some of the stuff around marae. So a few of the iwi that we talked to and some of the Māori advisors at council suggested that because disaster response is quite a large topic with a lot of detail, that while there could be sort of a small amount in an iwi management plan, to have an entirely separate document around responding and recovery to disasters. I also, this is just my experience working in the Wellington region as opposed to the Bay of Plenty region, but because there's a lot of urban marae, they tend to work with council on a marae to council level as opposed to the iwi level. But I do think there'd be some really good opportunities for some iwi in there to really look at some of the hazard profiles for marae in there. So yeah, no, really good point.
Wendy, can I just pick up on your response? Presumably they, and I understand you don't want to be prescriptive, but you would still establish guidelines in terms of content.
Yeah, well, what we're finding is in the Bay of Plenty, there's some consultants who specialise in writing these plans, and so they're involved in the development of quite a number of the newer plans coming through, and so they have a very good awareness. They know where to go for information, and actually it's being involved in this project, then they're now more aware, and they've been engaging with us a bit more around some of the development of the plans that they're involved with. So I think it's around raising the awareness as well. Part of this is what we're trying to do, is to say, hey, here's natural hazards need, or is one thing that can be considered, and it's about knowing where to go for information. So we asked the iwi representatives, where did you go to get your hazard information? The first sort of two answers usually was Google, and then it was the regional council or the council website. So really we need to be making sure that our science, our research is getting filtered through and shared with regional councils in a form so it can be uploaded spatially onto their GIS system and become available. But that was the two. Oh, and then the third one really was kind of who you know.
Questions down the back there?
Pam Johnston, NQC. Hi, Wendy. Great effort, Judy and Lucy. I'm just wondering whether these iwi resource management plans were like a New Zealand specific thing, or whether you looked internationally to see if other Indigenous cultures had done something similar. Just wonder if you know anything about that.
This was purely based here in New Zealand. We have some grand future plans for this project, which does include looking overseas to see what other initiatives there are.
I just wondered whether you were aware if these sort of plans are developed in other countries, and you haven't seen examples of that.
Peter Wood. A very interesting presentation. I've got a specific question, but I also want to make a comment. I noticed a transition through your presentation. You started off addressing iwi and Hapū Management Plans, but at the end, in the keynotes and some of the responses to questions, you're only talking about iwi.
Sorry,
you may like to comment on that.
Yeah.
But then the question, the deep question, through reading the plans that you have read, has there been insight coming from Māori which you were not previously aware of, particularly in the hazard space?
That's a really good question. I mean, some of them went into a lot of detail about the history of hazards. For instance, is it Ngāti Rangatihi?
Yeah.
Their rohi is in the Tarawera area, so they had a lot on the Tarawera eruption, and about how because of that eruption they migrated to Matata. And so it's quite interesting to read how that eruption affected their migration and where they moved to. And then with Matata there's a whole lot of mataranga as well around, you know, the landscape there, and stories around why perhaps, you know, that debris flow occurred from a Māori perspective. So that was really interesting seeing all that kind of link up, which I hadn't really appreciated before. As far as the terminology goes, you're right. This started off, we were looking at iwi management plans, and it's became a catch-all for Hapū Management Plans as well, because in some instances there is an iwi management plan, but there is also a Hapū Management Plan as well. The iwi management plans are more common, but there are instances, for instance, Matakana Island has their own plan as a hapū, and they can be quite distinct plans.
I would also add that there's a bit of a lack of consistency across councils, whether they refer to them as IMPs, IHMPs or HIMPs. So we've sort of made an executive decision in our stage 3 reporting to just go with the term IHMPs, but yeah, it's sort of dependent on the materials that you're reading with how you're referencing them.
Because some of them as well aren't called, they're not called, this is our iwi management plan. It might be called an environmental plan, or, you know, they can be called numerous different things. Under the Resource Management Act, it has to be, you know, it's a plan written by iwi Lodge with Council, so it doesn't name it specifically in the RMA either.
Dan Zwartz, Ministry for the Environment. I'm not familiar with what their status is as a legislative document. They're doing, but what arises when, or is there any cases where there are conflicts in values or priorities between them and the other plans, the council plans, and can you give us any examples and what happens when that's the case?
Yeah, we haven't really looked in depth at directly how the iwi management plans, how their policies have mapped over into district plans. So we haven't gone into that specific detail. We have looked at how councils have taken them into account in their policy, just in the policy wording, is how have they referred to iwi or Hapū management plans in their policies, but we haven't then mapped, you know, from one to the other. But I think we did have a few comments. I mean, it's written from an iwi perspective, so there are going to be clashes. It was really interesting at Matakana Island, for instance. There was a developer who wanted to come in and put in a big subdivision on the island, and it was going to double the population of Matakana, and so completely change, you know, the feel, you know, the community of Matakana Island. And the iwi representative said, you know, if that land was any good to build on, we would already be living there. You know, so there is definitely clashes between, you know, the aspirations perhaps of what council will allow versus what iwi or Hapū would prefer.
Yeah, I've got a question. A number of iwi and Hapū are starting to use GIS to have you seen that councils are willing to share their natural hazards and geospatial data with iwi in terms of using in their GIS to develop their iwi Hapū management plans?
I haven't seen it specifically in this project, but another project I'm working on, where I'm engaging with part of Ngāi Tahu, they have developed their own GIS system, and they are getting those spatial coverages from councils, and then putting it in their own GIS system and then using that, and it's really impressive. It's extremely impressive what they're doing.
Yep. Ken.
Ken Warren from Treasury. I'm interested in the system aspect of this. How often do they get updated, and what sort of leads to an update, and what might come after an update?
It's completely up to the iwi or hapū as to when they update their plans. So unlike a district plan, for instance, that has a 10-year sort of lifespan on it, it's completely up to the iwi. And so that is fully dependent on if something's changed, what resourcing that they have. It's completely up to them. There are some that are on their maybe third generation plans. Some of them, they will regularly update. Some they've decided they'll just, maybe every 5 years. So it's quite different for each one. What we found was some of the earlier ones are very aspirational, and so as they've progressed, they've become a lot more specific and very sort of written like a planning document. So there's definitely been sort of a progression of how they're written and used as well.
Any more queries before we wrap up? Otherwise, if there are none, thank you very much for a great presentation. Wendy and Lucy, and can we show our appreciation?